Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. And today's mind fuel question is brought from another creator, luminary in the tabletop role playing sphere. We're going to take a look at the video. Is magic a skill, a craft, or an art? So let's get past the intro and get into it. Hello once again. Down in the bottom here, we have a little clip from a video that I saw. Took me a little while to go back to it because I listened to a lot of content creators and brought up a question that I thought would be kind of fun to analyze and to deep dive into, and to get, we kind of like to get real geeky and nerdy around this side of the interwebs. And so I thought I would share that out to you. So let's take a look at this video, and we may go back to it if some people miss it. But essentially, the question is, in your fantasy tabletop role-playing world, what is magic like when it is taught? Now, the video primarily talks about magic schools and how they seem to emulate this kind of like 1920s to 50s UK style schools and colleges. But it goes on, the video goes on to ask this question, and I thought we would have some fun over here and talk about this question. So let's hear what the Grunge Master has to say. And the link is down in the doobly-doo. So here we go. Oops. I'm going to need my own headphones to even hear what's going on.
When historically the most common method of learning anything was training in a craft under an expert. Well, I think this all goes back to our fundamental expectations of what magic is. Is magic an art, a craft, or a skill? Let's define what I mean.
So, what do you guys think about this particular subject? Do you think it's an art, a craft, or a skill? And are there nuances in between each of those? So, for your opinions, I mean, in your world, is magic a natural aptitude that specific individuals are born with, kind of like a genetic marker? Does magic come from a place unknown and some are gifted or maybe even tainted or cursed with these abilities? Or can just anybody do it? Does it require a particular level of intelligence, or is it just a matter of perseverance and having the access to the schooling that's necessary to learn such a thing? Is magic a skill, a craft, or an art? So, and I'm sure there are other categories, but we'll deal with these three categories ostensibly up front, and then maybe go into other categories like like I started off with the beginning, like maybe born with it, or a genetic marker, or given this aptitude or capability or gift from some external source. And even if it is from an external source, what is it like? Is it like the X-Men, or is it like Spider-Man, or something like that? So, okay. Craft, art, or skill. So we think of many times a craft as not necessarily needing a lot of intelligence or brilliance to perform that thing, but it's more practice and rote ability, and you only perfect that craft from repetition and being part of maybe a guild, or having mentors and other professionals bring you up into that craft to teach you. Now, this is by no means singular categories that don't blend into other categories, and by no means do I think people that have do I think that individuals that are craft related aren't the most intelligent. No, I think the reasoning for separating it from craft, skill, and art and having those categories is that we think of crafts as being the everyman, and that any person, it's not really necessary to have a lot of education or be born of noble birth or anything. It just requires being able to hunker down and learn it over uh, an extended long period of time. And so if magic is that way, then it just means being able to have access to it and having external life drawing the person who wants to learn magic away from you know, their particular goal. For example, many people back in these pseudo medieval times, when we talk about fantasy, they have to stay on the farm, or they can't just leave home and go to the craft school. They have to stick around and care for their brothers and sisters and things like that. And then you have other things like drought and starvation and disease and all that kind of stuff. And so but there may be a kind of, who is going to be picked to go into the craft school to learn the magic itself. And you can see a lot of politicking in this, or maybe people don't know the mysterious ways that they open up their doors and they only take so many students, and how do they choose those students. Again, maybe we, if this is a craft, maybe we see a lot of older individuals with learning this magic, because it takes so long to perfect your hand positions and your language, and reading so many books and then practicing it again over and over again and trying to get it just right in order to cast a spell. Now, when we go from craft and go to skill or art, skill kind of is in the middle of a craft and an art, right? Like, when we think about athletes, many times we say to ourselves, well, if I were to put down all my other distractions, could I achieve the same skill level as those athletes? And while you may say, well, isn't that just a craft? Some people, even if you were able to get 20 people to engage in the same physical regiment and practice, maybe, again, they still wouldn't be able to achieve that level of achievement, of perfection. So that there must be something intrinsic in the individual, whether it's a basketball player that happens to have the requisite height, or a weightlifter that has the ectomorphic body type or something like that makes them wide and can hold that mass and muscle or something like that. Like, maybe there is not necessarily a particular birthmark or something of that nature, but maybe someone has to have a little bit of that skill in them, whether it's physical or mental or maybe even societal, that gets them over the edge to perfect this magic. And I would say that in a magic system where it's considered a skill, that you would have even less practitioners, or at least less people engaging in the art, because they would be more picky, because you would have to have some kind of skill beforehand, maybe great manual dexterity, or the ability to memorize things very quickly and accurately over longer periods of time, meaning, like, maybe it requires being able to memorize 100 pages of text perfectly and being able to pick which page the text comes from. There will be very few people who could do that initially before they're even picked to learn this skill. Something else is possible with the skill is that with a craft, and in individuals learning magic as an everyman. Maybe there's very, if you forget something, or you don't have the proper tools or etiquette or whatever, you can always go back and relearn that thing. Whereas in a skill, maybe there's a level at which your average individual would forget, or not have the ability to retain the information, and so there may be a kind of a leveling effect, where individuals that have a particular skill are just very much better at that thing. We see this in musical arts and dance and whatnot. Even in let's say go for a political or corporate, where yes, everyone can do math, but some people are very good at accounting and kind of take a little pride in the minutia of a thing, or the repetition of a thing. And so, yes, there are many, for example, there are many professions available to the public, but a lot of people don't go into them just because of a fear of heights, and working in a construction at very high heights, or working deep underwater and using scuba. You need to learn. You first have to, like, okay, I don't have. First of all, me personally, I don't like water. I don't like deep water at all. And I can swim really well, but there's a little bit of a fear. So that's going to cut down on the number of individuals, and that would even want to be involved in that. And then you go on into further things. So maybe skill has a bit of a, you must be good at this thing, or resistant to this thing, or not afraid of this thing, or have a little bit of a natural aptitude before you can learn it. And then lastly, our last category for learning magic is it an art? Is there something intrinsic that you can't measure, but individuals in your fantasy world are just a little bit more gifted? Is it the 7-year-old that just happens to have an attunement to the plants and animals around them? Is it the young man that just for some reason wakes up with from in a cold sweat from a nightmare before a dangerous thing happens to someone, and they just seem to be able to feel whether harmful things are going to happen in the future, much like dance and music, as I mentioned before, and the ability to memorize and whatnot. Like, is magic an art that can't be taught, and then that individual has a special nature attunement to this mystical or arcane world, and then from that point on, then they can start to learn magic from a school or mentor, or they're taken away or some to another place where that art is then cultivated. I'm not sure, and I think that's a great way of. And I think even if we go through these categories like craft, then skill, then art, I would say there would be even less people who would be able to learn this magic in this world if it's considered an art form. Much like I was talking about manual dexterity or very good eye-hand coordination, and I'm just talking about this physically. Maybe someone has a great balance, or has a very natural intrinsic method of knowing spatial distances, would be very good for various types of skills we have today, like whether it's with painting or dance, or accuracy with archery and firearms, or even in sports, being able to aim well at a goal or target, or learning how their body moves in a three-dimensional space and having great control of it. And we see that with gymnastics and track and field and soccer and other physical sports and things of that nature. And so maybe someone has to demonstrate these abilities, juggling and whatnot, or when we go more mental, being able to memorize, being able to learn numbers of languages. I mean, that's a very simple thing in a fantasy world. Like, you know what? Someone who can learn like 3 or 4 languages first, who naturally has the ability to pick up on those things, then those individuals might be recruited, which makes a lot of sense, especially if you would go for fantasy D20. You have to have a high intelligence, usually high intelligence characters, depending on which edition of, say, Dungeons and Dragons you play, or Pathfinder and all the other derivatives. You get, additional languages to pick from, and so maybe those individuals are just naturally language efficient and have a special aptitude for that. So therefore, the art then becomes this other thing. Also, if it's an art, unfortunately, maybe your average person, no matter how much they study and how much they practice, maybe they could never learn the magic, even if they learned how to read it and stand a certain way and put their fingers in a particular position and speak the words. They just don't. It's just not natural for them. Their timing is off. Their mental state just can't go into that particular region. They just can't meditate on a thing. They're easily distracted. And most recently, it's like you can cast a spell, but you may have to make a concentration check. Well, maybe there's only a certain portion of the population that can achieve such a mental state without having distractions around them. And those distractions could be internal and external. Like, oh, I'm hungry and I didn't sleep very good and I'm worried about my family. And they're like, nah, you got to put all that aside. Like, you literally have to ignore the pain in your body. That little itch you have in your big toe, you're going to have to ignore all that and whatnot. And maybe some people can't get to that mental level naturally. Very few people can, and the ones that can make it art. Now, of course, we have a lot of external things that can bring about magic, but when it comes to like magic schools and fantasy, who's picked, how are they picked, and the politicking around it, I think would be very interesting, very cool. And you could even, as me suffering from world builder's disease, there's plenty of things that you can use to world build around magic schools. Like, for example, how many people fail out of magic schools, and what have they learned about the secrets of the magic school, if there are that many secrets, and what do they do with those things? Like, do they sell their unfinished education on the black market? Does it require graduation to actually cast spells? Or is there some magical aptitude gained by those who fail out of it? They're just not very dangerous or reliable or useful for society, right? Like, the ability to cast a fireball is useful, but not very broadly, right? Like, the ability to cast light is very useful in society, far more than a fireball. A fireball is probably only really good for on a battlefield, and maybe in a celebratory way, to like, almost like shooting off fireworks. But the ability to cast light is enormously powerful in a medieval society. So is the person that cast a fireball kicked out? And then what kind of, then you're going like, wait a minute, if they have access to such a weapon of mass destruction, do we really want that person being failed out of school? Also, what are the side effects of the magic in your world? Maybe a lot of the sentient monsters, intelligent monsters in your world have come from people who have not learned the right skills in magic. It's like, oh, you can learn magic and become a pyromancer and let the fire flow through you, but if you haven't learned how to, staunch the flow of the fire that burns through you, then maybe you become an elemental or an Ifrit or an Azor or a Hellhound or any of these other flaming monstrosities that are out there. So it could also be a dangerous thing. Learning magic may be very dangerous as well, reducing the population of people that even want to do it, because it's like, yeah, maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 10 makes it, and everybody else is a danger to society, and you may not even survive the crucible to become a magic wielding individual. And then there's also, after learning the magic, is there some kind of policing for over the individuals that have learned the magic? And we could go back and do an old it was an old video about how does, in a world of magic, how are the average citizens protected from those who have the magic? Because it would be very easy for extremely low levels of magic in our fantasy games to pretty much dominate society, especially with like illusions and mind intricacies where you could just like use prestidigitation and thaumaturgy to pretty much fool a lot of people, along with like your charm spells and things like that. Like human society would just be would ostensibly be just cannon fodder for even the most minor of magics. But if magic is a craft, a skill, or an art, it could be that there's other individuals who are so good at it that they police those beneath them, much like a mentor or a guild or a law enforcement or teachers and professors would to know about their students. They would know, for example, the signature type of magic cast by their spells, by those students, because they're like, oh, I know what school they graduated from. Heck, I taught that student because 5 days later they're putting their hand on the ground and closing their eyes, and they're like, yeah, I can feel the weave that they did. Yeah, I know who this person is. As a matter of fact, give me just a moment. 3, 2, 1. Yep, I know where they're at right at this moment. I'm going to go speak to this person because there's a lot of destruction here, right? And that makes a lot of great storytelling. Also, how individuals are motivated to and then chosen to go to these schools. What kind of politicking would happen there? Would there be crowds of people parked outside in tent camps waiting to get inducted into these schools? Or is it more of a mentorship where, yes, there's a wizard's tower, but periodically one or more of these spellcasters will come through the population, and everyone's mysterious because this person doesn't say anything, and they find some rando and go, I'm picking you, you're coming to my school. And the family's crying because they know that their third born child is going to leave them to be taught in the school because there really isn't much of a choice whether they go or not. Or heck, even a nobility may not even particularly like these spellcasters picking and choosing randos out of their population, because they're like, no, we're the nobility, we should pick and choose who goes and gets to do what. But these spellcasters are like, no, we're not only are we more powerful than you, but we actually ignore your political hierarchy. And it's like, no, we get to pick and choose these powerful individuals. And I could see noble families and nobility and mundane politics being a little bit like scared of something that disrupts the status quo and elevating, the poor folk into a higher status by teaching them these magical arts. Or the opposite, the magic craft may be intrinsic to the political system, and that's why their nations are protected, because they have these spellcasters that are being taught, and these spellcasters then serve the public, which in turn makes the enemy a little bit scared when they're like, oh, there's a cadre of like 20 pikemen that I'm scared of. Or I'm even more scared of this one individual who just graduated from school and they're walking around with like a bronze mask on their face. So now their facial expressions are inscrutable, but they have these magical powers. And wow, these individuals are not only highly capable and highly skilled, but it seems like the population has a natural affinity for this kind of magic. Now, there may be external things that give people the ability to cast magic, like the Spider-Man thing, right, where an accident happens, or a particular spatial alignment of the stars in the sky, or there are these pools of magic, or storms, or birthmarks, or whatever. And in those cases, then you can get a little bit more specific. Like in Eberron, they have things known as dragon marks, and kind of like half birthmark, half tattoo, half physical tattooed display of an inner ability. And that may be something as well where when a child gets to a certain age, or families or something are when children are born, everyone sits around and wants to look in the window because they're looking to see if there's a birthmark on their chest or their arm or the back of their neck or something. And if they do have it, they're just like, they're going to wizard school, and the kid's just like, nah, throw up, right? Like, okay, well, what do we do now? And maybe that individual's protected as a child, and I could see even that child before they become go into adolescence being like, I don't want to be a magic user, I don't want to leave the family, and everyone's like, yeah, you act like you got a choice in this, but you don't. There are if we can get into folklore like changelings and things where children have been exchanged, stolen, and other children placed in their location, or shape-shifted fae have become children and babies and taking the being merged into and take the place of certain children. That could be a thing, and that could actually be very dangerous, because maybe those adversaries want to learn the secrets of magic, and those magic people are like, I know you're fae and I know who you are. Or it could be the opposite, where they're inducted into it. But again, going back to the original question of magic, is it a craft, a skill, or an art? Now, once the people have graduated out of these magic schools, how does the public and or the educators look at the magic? Like, if it's a craft, then we can see that it's not just like you could sit on your rear end for 5 years and then get back into it. Maybe it requires a lot of constant practice and learning, and pushing oneself to, like the everyman, it just doesn't come natural. It is something that they must constantly study over and over again. And this in fantasy could very much parallel the game thing. Like, I've always got to read my spell book. I always have to study. I always have to memorize. Even when I cast my spells, the Vancian magic, each spell is written into the brain of the individual, and when they cast that spell, the words, the acts, the everything just completely disappears, and they have to literally learn it all over again. And that may be very strange to the outsiders. Like, listen, I've learned carpentry. I don't forget it when I go to sleep and wake up the next day, or once I finish building a table. It's not like I forgot the skill, can't build another one. But for magic, that may be the very case. Like, no, I read the book to figure out how to cast a spell, but once I cast that spell, I don't remember how to do it at all. I've got to reread it and do it again over and over again. And that very much falls into that craft kind of element, especially if the magic requires lots of external things, like a laboratory, or a peaceful place that with no distractions whatsoever, spell components that are necessary to cast the spell and whatnot. Now, when we go further from is it a craft to a skill, again, for example, that memorization, could I memorize 20 pages of a script to become an actor? I don't know. I've done it in grade school and high school and wasn't very particularly good at it. And there are some people who could take a 200-page script and they're like, yeah, I can read this and memorize it, no big deal, right? Instead of using cue cards or something, which would be pretty funny for spellcasters that aren't very good at it, to have, all right, goblins, you go off into the corners, and they're holding up cue cards so they can read the spell. But even in world building, imagine a city-state with magical inscriptions on the walls and the ground, that those that are skilled don't need to have spell books. They can read off of the walls itself, or the banners that hang from the I don't know, maybe there's banners that they can put up during wartime or something like that, invasion time, and literally, no, they don't have spell books, but the spells to defend the city are written on the very walls of the city, and they can not only just read them, but they have practiced abilities. And I think that'd be kind of cool, especially from an outsider. Like, player characters like, seriously, there's like hold person and invisibility and shield spells like literally written on the walls. What the hell is this? Like, for everybody to use, and then you come to find out that the blue scarf wearing individual guild, you know, they have magic, but maybe they outlawed, or maybe just naturally they just don't carry spell books. But guess what? They've already got their spell prepared, because they can just look at the ground or the wall or the stones or the banners or the whatever, and cast those spells in mass in and around the city. And I think that'd be kind of cool. Also, we don't need to, you know, when it comes to spell and spell casting and things like that in schools, no, we don't need to do the Oxford, college, everyone goes to class and they learn these different things. Not at all. We can just use plenty of historical methods of how people learn. For example, there are always students that go to a master, right? Like, if we think about crafting, when it comes to stonework, carpentry, fashion, I'm trying to think of like individualistic things where someone is a master and they don't necessarily have a school. It's more like they find students and teach them to pass on that skill. But really, they don't have a school. They've got like a garage. They've got a backyard. They've got a laboratory. They have a observatory or something of that nature. And of course, tropishly, there's always like the gruff individual master that like doesn't really want a student, but they know they have to pass on their talent. Or you have the student that's like, I want to learn from you, and the teacher's just like, go away from me, kid, right? But mentorship, from mentoring one or multiple kids or young adults or whatever, or individuals that want to learn this new skill, that's very common even till today, right? You have a family member that's very good at fixing cars, and they're like, you know what, you just turned 16, you want me to help you buy a car? You're going to have to stick with me over the weekends, and I'm going to teach you how to change the oil and rebuild an engine and all that kind of stuff. And so it might be like that, where you've got this wandering master who just is like, you and you and you over there, you come with me, I'm gonna teach you something. And everyone's like, yay! Or, he's going off in the woods with my kids, like, what the hell is that about? And then there's also, of course, we've got the idea of guilds, more so than a college, where much like a plumber school or HVAC location, like, it is a school, and you're not really going to learn much beyond what they're going to teach you. But yeah, you can go in and learn something and come on out, but maybe it's not like formal with like robes and levels and degrees and pomp and circumstance. It's like, roll up your sleeves, and you're just going to get down and dirty, and we're going to teach you here in this guild. And oh, by the way, when you graduate and we think you're ready, you're going to have to come to us and give back to us and pass on that talent. Like for example, a player character, it may be their retirement is you're going to have to pass on your skills to the next generation. It could be militarized. So instead of a school, it's more like a military. And if it's militarized, it may have an intrinsic tie to governmental systems. So yeah, we can teach you magic, but we're also going to indoctrinate you. And that indoctrination could be very mundane, like with nation states. Like, not only are we teaching our special individuals magic, but they're also going to be loyal to our political system. But it could be even beyond that. Like, for example, Marvel superheroes SHIELD, DC superheroes Star Labs or something, where it's like, no, we're going to recruit you because there's even more dangerous things out there in the multiverse, And in order to even get your brain to understand the different, the time space continuum of the fourth and fifth and sixth dimension, you're going to have to come with us so that you're not driven insane by just seeing this thing. It could be like Shaolin Temple monk style teaching where even the teachers and the way of learning and the students don't understand what the hell's going on. I remember an old martial arts kung fu movie that was great called depending on where you first saw this, sometimes it was called Master Killer, but the most common title for that in the States was the 36 Chambers. And in the school, it actually had 35 chambers all the way till the end of the movie. Spoiler alert. One of the individuals, very classic beginning, untrained individual, tribes person, walks around and evil warlords are kill his friends and family and whatnot. So he runs to the Shaolin Temple and is like, I want to be taught martial arts. I want to join the temple. And they go, sure, you can come in the temple. And he starts sweeping up and they have him sweeping all day long. And he's like, why am I sweeping? I want to learn martial arts. And they go, oh, okay. So if you want to learn martial arts, you're going to have to go eat. And he's like, okay, I'll go eat. And in order to eat, you have to, there's a hallway, and the hallway has a pit of water in it and logs floating in the water. And in order to get something to eat, you have to run across the log to the other side in order to get food. And there's a little bit of comedy of errors as he tries to like climb the wall and he wants to swim across the water. And then eventually he has to learn enough skill to run across the log to go eat, not understanding that the running across the log is teaching him something. And this process goes on through each of the chambers, up to 35 chambers, at which point he masters all 35 skills, goes out and beats ass on the bad guys that destroyed all the people, comes back to the school and opens up the 36th chamber. And it's really cool. Anyway, but the reason for even talking about that is that instead of classrooms, it may be something like, a dark room with a fire in the middle, and the person goes, you must tame the fire, and they just close the door on them, and they're like, what do you mean by that? Right? And then the fire gets bigger and it floats around the room and tries to burn the person, and you're like, you gotta tame it, and the person's like scared and burning their elbow, and they're like, what the fuck is it like? And eventually they, maybe it's like taming the fire inside of them, or eventually they ignore the fire and they close their eyes, and eventually the fire goes out and the teacher magically, instinctively opens up the doors like, you have tamed the fire. Now we must, get you to do this other thing and whatnot. And so it could be very like, how do you say, like, even if your average individual saw it, they wouldn't understand what the hell's going on. And most students don't understand until they get it to move on to something else. Also, spies, infiltrators, individuals that want to learn from the schools could be very common. Adversarial schools and students fighting in the streets, saying my school's better than your school. There may even be public competitions between different magic schools if there are more than one magic school. And how is that done? Is it like Kertamin from Ars Magica, where you really don't see anything? It's just one person's mind trying to dominate the weave and the of the magic over the other one? Or is it actual physical confrontation? Like, I'm gonna blast you with cold and I'm gonna dodge it aside and throw out my hands that are burning, and then other person summons up a wolf and goes after, which could be pretty horrible if you have pretty arrogant students walking around burning and electrocuting and freezing average individuals because they think they're all that, which would be kind of fun and kind of cool world building wise, where you've got like where you have literal gangs of young adolescent wizards think they're all that, even though they're just basically apprentices, and just because they've been able to learn one spell, now they think they're all that, and they're going around, hey, I can magically change the color of things, so I'm gonna like hit up on the walls, graffiti on the walls, and everyone's just rolling their eyes like, boy, I would love to backhand that kid, but I can't do it because their parents are so and so, and they do belong to that school, and the teachers in the school don't care about us mundanes, and they might just blast my tavern or my bakery or something for backhanding that kid or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of really fun and cool things, especially all the fun experiments that get out of control, the reason for even having a magical school. Marvel's Doctor Strange and DC's Dr. Fate are there watching over Earth from external invasions from the multiverse in different dimensions. And it could be that these, magical creatures from other worlds and other outside regions and the uncharted parts of the world periodically, like seasonally or something like that, try to overrun parts of society. And that's where these magical schools really shine. And those students may have to go out and it may be necessary to adventure to say, hey, we need to show you what this like we've showed you examples of fiends. We kind of need you to go out there and see what a real fiend stepping through a real fiendish portal looks like, and throw the students into the crucible of survival when they're just like, when you told me to look down into the abyss, I didn't think it would like turn my brain into spaghetti. That I think that kind of thing would be cool. I once ran an adventure where the characters had to take they got a dragon egg. The dragon egg hatched, and then the wizard that gave them the quest in the first place told them they had to take the very, very young dragon to a special school because dragons learn magic not from humans, but they learn them from some other place. And when they get there, well, I didn't tell them this, but when they took the dragon to the dragon school, that's where they began to learn magic from the dragon, when they appreciated that the humans saved the adolescent dragon to get them there in the first place. Anyway, it's a whole big thing. But yeah, there may be different schools for different like species, racial things. Like, oh, the elven schools teach this thing, and the dwarven schools teach something else. And to become a really polyglot, you have to learn from the different places and regional areas and things like that. Like, hey, you want to learn fire magic? You got to learn it from the dwarves from the volcanic mountain or something like that, but they don't know much else. Whereas if you want to learn Misty Step, teleportation, dimension door, instant transport, warp doors, or whatever, you're going to have to go to, I don't know, the gnomes of blah, 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 or something, right? So anyway, thank you very much for being here. Although you may, if you have been sending in chats, which I'm not certain whether you have or have not, I haven't seen any chats show up. So I'm a little confused. So it's not me. So if you think I'm ignoring you, that's actually not the case. I actually don't see anything, neither from Twitch or YouTube. And I've been having these little issues. Now, if no one has typed anything, you're perfectly fine, right? I ostensibly wanted to do a different, more controversial subject. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. And matter of fact, why the hell not? So I've been listening to some of the reviews of the new 2024 Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. And something that I've talked about plenty of times on this channel, but that I think might be controversial, which, you know me, I don't think it's very controversial, that in the art for many of the monsters in the new Monster Manual, they put them into, they wanted the art to reflect the monster in use. But one thing that they did was they made male versions of normally female versions of those monsters. And we know through mythology that a lot of monsters are gender coded for a reason. A lot of the male monsters tend to be male. They're very violent, bestial, sometimes mindless, warlike and whatnot, dominating. torturous, whereas the female version of those monsters tend to be seductive, illusionary, insidious, and that sort of thing. And we often, for example, your female coded monsters tend to be succubus, hag, siren, dryad, and your male monsters are goblinoids, giants, were creatures. They tend to be coded that way. And I'm sure there's going to be some videos out there destroying the woke culture of Dungeons and Dragons by actually having artwork of like a male Medusa, a male hag, which I don't know if you would call them a warlock. I guess you could call them, what would a male hag be? A haggard? If you had to come up with a new name for it or something. Anyway, it would just be a spellcaster or whatnot. But you get the point. And I think, first of all, I think the so-called controversy isn't very controversial. Anything that, for us world builders, that helps us tell a better story, I think is always useful. And I think confronting our uncomfortability with everything from gender and age and race and culture and all that kind of stuff, to me, is just another tool in my toolbox. Which brings me to the point of this artificial fear that people have of like woke D&D is ruining the game and whatnot. And I'm just like, really? Because it's just marketing. That's all it really is. And if I get another tool to put in my toolbox, hell yeah. Which shit, I remember years ago I put up a post about like 20 different ways we can use like quilt bag, like LBGTQ type of things for great storytelling and whatnot. And it's very easy to destroy things, I think, when it comes to art. And I always fall more positive. I'm a glass half full kind of individual instead of glass half empty. And so I like to throw my 2 cents into how breaking gender tropes adds to, and we can world build from that, because I think it would be kind of cool. So anyway, I thought about doing that. So yeah, we'll do that tomorrow. It won't be as controversial as you think it is, but the thumbnail probably will be. The thumbnail's probably going to poke some people in the eye, I think, if my thumbnail idea is pretty good in my head. But yeah, I like monster manuals. I like the way people structure things, although I don't think monster manuals are necessary any longer. You can make an infinite number of monsters with just very simple numbers, because most players don't know what the hell's going on behind your DM screen kind of thing, but whatever. I like artwork, and I would love to find out like what the community thinks about that kind of thing. I know there's going to be people who are like this sucks and they're destroying D&D. I know there's going to be a lot of those hit pieces. And then I wonder how the average player who like isn't on the interwebs considers that, whether they're just like, oh, it's artwork, whatever, no big deal, or is it more creative, like, oh, I never thought about making a male Medusa. And yes, I know a female succubus is an incubus, which is weird since succubi and incubi are shapeshifters, so they probably don't have a gender, but I don't know. That's weird as well. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I'm sorry if anyone was actively trying to participate. Don't know why there's no chat features up at all, so apologize for that. But we'll talk tomorrow, and maybe I'll take a look at the video on YouTube and Twitch and see if there's some comments left over there. If they are, leave a middle finger over there as well to let me know. Give me a matter of fact, type in all caps like an FU, just so I can see it. All right. So guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it, and we will have these before after game discussions then and there. So guys, have a great one. I'll see you later. Bye.